Welcome. This is a Latter-day Media live event, and Mike and Nancy are going to be doing one of these, hopefully every month, to assist us with everything that we need to know. I am Helena Kleinlein. I am here to give a similar presentation that I gave in my ward, the Lakeview 4th Ward, a few months ago, and the video went viral. But because it went viral, our ward was a little bit concerned because it was done in a church setting. So we decided to re-record the event. And I've been able to take a little bit of liberty and add a few things because now I am speaking purely for myself, and I do not represent the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in any way. Who am I? I'm not even the ward preparedness person. I know a lot of people think that I am, but I am not. I am somebody who has studied this topic for a long time. Life events have brought me to this point. Graduated from Brigham Young University, born and raised in England in a boarding school. Worked in my field for about 5 years, and then never again, which is probably a story a lot of us can tell. Had a child with a terminal brain tumor who went through all the conventional treatments where they all failed, and they sent us home to die. At which point, my Father in heaven just opened my eyes to the power of nutrition in healing and other healing modalities that don't apply here. And it's been 15 years, and she's alive and thriving. And I credit a lot of that to the knowledge that my Father in heaven gave me. So nutrition is very important to me. So I follow a lot what's going on in our food supply. And being from England, I'm also very curious in what's going on internationally. It's been very interesting because what happens over in Europe eventually comes to America. I used to say that America was 20 years behind Europe. But not anymore. We might just be a couple of years behind Europe at this point. And it's been a fascinating study to study the patterns. And I'm not a lazy learner. I love learning. And one of my dear mentors once gave some very precious counsel. And he said, if you ask the Lord to enlighten your mind, quicken your intellect, and broaden your understanding, the Lord will teach you. And what I'm going to present tonight is simply what I have learned. Do with it whatever you will. And share with whomever you desire to share it with. There's a lot of things in life that we take for granted. We take for granted that the sun will always shine, that our heart will always beat, and that there will always be plenty of food for us to eat. Healthy food, junk food, it doesn't matter. It will always be plentiful. Well, sometimes we can see in an eclipse that those belief systems can be challenged. But the thing with an eclipse, there's many stages of the eclipse before we go into darkness. But in order to be able to see those stages, we do need special lenses so that we can see each stage. And we have those special lenses in these 15 men. They are able to show us the stages that we are in. So the stages of an eclipse appear to be sort of subtle. Most of us don't even notice these stages, where just color changes, saturates, and mutes. And if we pay attention to nature, they know what's going on. But many of us don't even pay any attention to these stages. And then the final stage is darkness, and that gets our attention. So where are we from the brethren? Are they warning us of stages? So last year in a religious freedom speech at BYU, Elder David A. Bednar was counseling on religious freedom, and he began his talk with a mighty famine arose in that land, and he began to be in want. It was an unusual way to begin a talk on religious freedom. And later, he says this is a wake-up call, and he reiterated again, a mighty famine arising in the land. Then in general conference, moving forward, our prophet taught us, during the past few months, our world has been turned upside down. Was that just a casual comment, or was he really trying to focus our attention on what is going on in our world? And then Elder Bednar went into quite a lot of details saying that some church members opine that emergency plans and food storage must not be important anymore because the brethren don't speak about them extensively. And he said, but repeated admonitions to prepare have been proclaimed by leaders of the church for decades. The consistency of prophetic counsel over time creates a powerful concert of clarity and a warning volume far louder than solo performances can ever produce. And then there was Bishop Waddell, where he reminded us of the 7 years of plenty followed by the 7 years of famine in Egypt. And he reminded us that because they followed Joseph in the land of Egypt, there was bread. And then Bishop Waddell counsels us it was not enough to know that challenging times would come. They had to act, and because of their effort, there was bread. He also specifically said that the best storehouse is the home, which becomes the most accessible reserve in times of need. And then our prophet, in Embrace the Future with Faith, went into specific details, telling us to store food, water, and financial reserves. And he said, I urge you to take steps to be temporarily prepared. And then he reminded us about Captain Moroni. And he says, Moroni prepared his people in 3 essential ways. First, he helped them create areas where they would be safe. Places of security, he called them. Second, he prepared the minds of the people to be faithful unto the Lord. And third, he never stopped preparing his people physically or spiritually. And he added, turbulent times are opportunities for us to thrive spiritually. Yes, he is telling us that turbulent times are here. And then in the first edition of the Liahona magazine in January of 2021, one of the very first things he mentioned is there shall be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in diverse places. Are they bringing us and showing us the final stage of an eclipse? I would suggest that yes, we are headed for food shortages. So put on your lenses and let me show you what is going on in our world today that validates the things our leaders have said. Armstrong Economics said that the next famine will begin in 2022. And they warned that we are currently reducing the food supply at a time when we should be stockpiling it. The church itself in October of 2020 said that double the number of people in 2020 are facing acute food insecurity. And the pandemic disrupted supply chains and crop distributions, all at a time of already exploding hunger. And then they gave an ominous warning. Without being too alarmist, if we do not address this crisis in a coordinated manner, it is projected to grow to be among the worst famine in human history. And there is a study done on PubMed that shows it takes about 2 years after an economic shock to see food shortages. And I'm sure none of us had to be told that it is the most vulnerable in our society that are disproportionately affected. So, the concept of food shortages have gone from theoretical to real. That's from Investment Watch. I'm going to go over a few reasons why this has happened. 2021 has seen devastating weather all around the globe. There have been ice storms in some rare places, especially Texas and Arkansas, Kentucky, and Tennessee. There have been severe earthquakes in Iran, Argentina, Turkey, Asia, New Zealand, Japan, and the Philippines. And there have been severe flooding in the mid and southeast of the USA, Mexico and South America, Europe, the Middle East, Asia, Indonesia, and a very rare snowstorm in Israel. What is going on? Well, have you heard about the grand solar minimum? Most of us have not. But you can go to this website, thegrandsolarminimum.com, and learn about it. Because scientists are telling us that the sun is heading into a new solar minimum right now. Now, despite loud claims that man-made CO2 is somehow driving the climate, both history and science demonstrate that the most influential driver of planetary climate is actually the sun and its predictable cycles. NASA is reporting that there is a solar minimum coming, and so is the American Thinker. And they made an interesting comment, and they said, this coming grand solar minimum will have much more impact on the environment than anything we puny humans can do. So what is a solar minimum? It's actually sunspots. And this is showing you 400 years of sunspot observations. You can see that the most severe solar minimum was the Maunder minimum, around 1650. We had another one, a Dalton minimum and a modern maximum. But they believe that we are heading into one that is similar to the Maunder minimum. What happens is temperatures drop globally, and this leads to shorter growing seasons, and it brings food shortages. I can't fully explain it to you, but these minimums create both droughts and floods simultaneously around the world. That leads to harvest failures, and then we have wars and revolutions. Are we really seeing any of this? Yes, we really are. In Minnesota in the spring, they had an unusual freeze injury to their corn. Canada is reporting late spring frosts that is destroying their fruit. And India is suffering its coldest June temperature ever recorded. Now, how is this affecting us in the western United States? Well, drought. I am in Utah, and this shows you the U.S. Drought Monitor map of Utah. We are in exceptional drought. And they say this will cause about 50% decrease in what we're able to produce for crops. This is how severe it is in the western United States. Notice it is affecting the agricultural growing regions of our country. And then you get interesting articles like this one, where they're saying a water crisis could not be worse on the Oregon-California border. But if you read the article, you see that the water crisis went from dire to catastrophic as federal regulators shut off irrigation water to farmers from a critical reservoir, and they will not send extra water to the dying salmon downstream. This should be making you question, what is going on? But let me give you an action point. No matter where you live, make sure you have access to clean water. And if you live in an area that could flood, make sure you take the necessary precautions in advance. We also have some severe locust plagues going on around the world. The locusts have devoured almost 100% of the crops in East Africa. And if you look at this map, now the locusts are spreading into West Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, and over into India, all in search of more food. When locusts land on a crop, it can be annihilated in just one day. They can eat 3 times their body weight in food and can travel hundreds of miles in a day. Despite the lack of media attention, this crisis is worsening, not improving. And what is an action point? LDS Charities has asked us to pray and fast for Africa and their locust situation. It is dire. And what about our dying bee population, also known as colony collapse disorder? Experts believe that we have lost 1/3 of our bee population just in the last 15 years. If we lose our bees, we lose our food supply. No apples, cherries, onions, celery, cabbage, almonds, and blueberries, and many other things. Why are they dying? Well, experts believe that it is the bee-killing pesticides called neonics that are sprayed on the crops that are 6,000 times more deadly to bees than DDT. And the other problem is the proliferation of genetically modified plants that do not provide the nutrition that will keep these bees disease-free. So what is an action point for you? Know the pesticides that you use in your garden. Plant heirloom flowers or vegetables. They will nourish the bees. And if you can, place a bee house in your yard. This is a place where they can lay their eggs and they can be protected from predators and harsh weather. So this complex global supply chain has been disrupted to an unprecedented level, and our shipping prices just keep rising globally. Why is this happening? Well, around the world, the pandemic closed ports and factories, reduced the workforce, and it stagnated production. This has just halted global shipping, and now we've got containers stuck around the world in wrong places. And it's actually taking longer to unload containers than it is taking to cross the Pacific. Here's an article from American Shipper. They are saying that the rates for container ships are off the chart at $135,000 a day. The market has become absolutely frenzied. There's more and more inquiry every single day, and people are panicking. And that is driving up the costs of just about everything we use. This is the Drury World Container Index. It measures the price of a shipping container. Currently, it's up 282% with no end in sight. So what is the action point for your family? Well, this is a very individual question. What is a critical commodity for your family? Batteries? Peanut butter? Toothpaste? What about chocolate? Did you know that in 2021, world cocoa demand is set to outstrip the supply by more than 1 million tons? That might be a problem for some. So what is going on with the global food supply that is causing the container crisis? Countries around the world are taking frantic steps to secure their food. Argentina, Brazil, Russia, Ukraine, and China are refusing to allow the world market to draw their crops. And many other countries are limiting their exports to the rest of the world. The chart on the right is showing you that China is implementing Joseph of Egypt-like policies. They are not exporting food at all. They are just importing it in very large quantities. So what are we doing? Well, the USA exports more food to the world than any other country. We predominantly export to Canada, Mexico, Japan, and China. And we keep committing more and more food, even though we too are experiencing agricultural decline, just like the rest of the world. Some of our farmers in Idaho have sold all of their 2021 crops to other countries, and many have committed their 22 crops also. Now, we have always been a very compassionate people, and we've always been able to afford to be. But are we sure that we can take care of our own? So just as this reduction in the world's volume of food, it is pushing us towards a crisis level. But we've always had a grain reserve. Well, historically, that is true. But the U.S. government sold all of our grain reserves in the 1996 Farm Bill. The U.S. has nothing in the emergency food pantry. There is no cheese, no butter, no dry milk powder, no grains, or anything else left in reserve. And this was produced just last week. It is showing you the U.S. spring wheat market. You can see that lower line is this year compared to the last 8 years. It is a little grim. So what's the action point? If you have ever assumed that you would store long-term grains, or if you need more, now is the time to do it, because your window of opportunity is closing. And if you are a home baker who purchases bulk flour, stock up now. This makes Bishop Waddell's advice prophetic wisdom. The best storehouse is the home, which becomes the most accessible reserve in times of need. Now let's take on climate change. We know this is controversial, so we need to find some unifying ground here. This is how we can take some responsibility. Mortals create the problem, and then mortals attempt to create the solution. We need to look at these proposed solutions to see how they're going to affect your family. So this is a fact. global food production contributes between 15 and 25% of greenhouse gas emissions. The authorities can't quite agree on that percentage. Another fact, the solutions for climate change are undermining food production systems. And the danger lies in our inability to properly assess the consequences of such solutions. Let me share one with you that you might not know about. This is National Geographic. They're putting it in writing for us. They're telling us the immediate goal is to reduce animal agriculture. And the governments of the world are discussing a sin tax on meat globally. But what they're not telling you yet is the end goal is to eliminate all animal agriculture. That is meat, dairy, eggs. The EAT Stockholm Food Forum just of last year, they were one of the first ones that came out and actually stated it. They said, our mission is to remove all animals from the food system by 2035. They also said our goal is to completely replace animals in the food system. You laugh, but we are completely serious about it, and it's doable. That was Pat Brown, the founder of Impossible Foods. The Stockholm Food Forum actually printed that their aim was to cut the meat and dairy intake of the global population and replace it with lab-made foods, cereals, and oil. Lab-made foods. How do you feel about that? Well, here's the World Economic Forum. They are suggesting that we three-dimensionally print steak to help us reduce meat consumption. And this is another article from the Food Revolution Network, and they are discussing lab-grown food, the pros and the cons. Is this far-fetched? Well, here's the Harvard Political Review actually stating that they also want to end animal agriculture. And our favorite teenage activist, Greta Thunberg, she has come out and said that both farming and ranching is dirty and dangerous. She says we should all be on a plant-based diet. And she says that our diet of eating animals creates a public health crisis like COVID. Okay, are we seeing this in our daily life? Yes, if you start to look, you will see the New York Times put out an article pushing meatless meat. And now you can read about growing seafood. And how does that do? You know, some people don't mind eating lab-created meats. Others do. Do you worry about your protein? Well, they have got a solution for that too. So back to the World Economic Forum. They are suggesting that you could eat worms for dinner, and Europe is backing insect-based food because it is a good protein source, and they don't use as many natural resources as animal agriculture do. Well, what about in America? Well, here's the USA Today saying, how would you like your taco to have a cicada in it? We are starting to see this bombard us all around. But how are they going to do it? I mean, most of these farmers, this is in their family, isn't it? Well, let's look at what's going on in Europe. Remember, I told you in the beginning that they're a few years ahead of us. The Dutch government is actually paying farmers to stop farming. Yes, the average compensation is about $833,000. And currently, 66% of pig farmers said they would abandon their business right now if they were offered the right compensation. And this is happening all around Europe. So, what can your family do? Meat is just not important to everyone, but maybe dairy or eggs are. So if it's important to you, you need to store it. If you want meat, store meat. If you want eggs for protein, store scrambled eggs. If you are a baker, store whole egg powder. Store powdered milk. What about our greens? So this is an article from IBM, and it talks about how they want to grow greens. The direction that vegetable and fruit production is moving is into traceability from seed to table. This will be accomplished through AI and blockchain science. And some people like the idea that you could come home and ask Google Home, Alexa, or Siri where your spinach came from. But as someone who cares about the nutrition in food, this is how they're going to grow the greens. If you know anything about nutrition, you know that the nutrition comes from the soil and gets into the plant. I am very concerned about what growing on styrofoam will do for the quality of the plant. So what's the action point here? Grow what your family likes to eat. It's the only way that you can control the nutrients in the soil. Yes, I know it's not easy for everybody, but you can container garden, you can give a little dedicated piece of land, you can build box gardens. There are options. Now there's one that you probably haven't heard of, and this one might be the most concerning. It's called 30 by 30. It's a conservation target. And here again is the World Economic Forum. I would strongly advise everyone follows what the World Economic Forum is up to. So they have said we need to protect 30% of the planet by 2030, and this is how we can do it. Doesn't sound bad, does it? Beautiful picture. We all want to take care of the planet. Well, Europe has already signed on. The European Union signed on first. They agreed to protect 30% of the land and the water. Boris Johnson signed on, and Justin Trudeau of Canada signed on. America was holding out. But in January of this year, we signed for 30 by 30. And this is National Geographic again, and they are saying officially the US commits to tripling its protected lands, and maybe this is how it's going to be done. So they weren't really sure how it's going to be done, and we're not quite sure yet, but there are some things coming out. This is an article from AgWeb. This is Tom Vilsack. He is our Secretary of Agriculture, just like Ezra Taft Benson was. And he has shown his hand a little bit more. In an interview that he gave, he said, the president has committed 30% of our working lands and public lands being dedicated in some form to conservation. I think that it also plays into the strength of CRP. CRP is another word for 30 by 30. It is the Conservation Reserve Plan. Now think about this for a minute. The state of Nebraska is 97% private owned. What are they going to do with that? Right now, we don't know, but it is certainly something that we should be preparing for because it's going to affect our food supply. Okay, so what can we realistically expect? You have heard most of the facts, and you need to decide the implications. But let's go back to Ezra Taft Benson. He said, too often we bask in our comfortable complacency and rationalize that the ravages of war, economic disaster, famine, and earthquake cannot happen here. Those who smugly think these calamities will not happen, that they will somehow be set aside because of the righteousness of the saints, are deceived and will rue the day they harbored such a delusion. So what are you going to do with all of this information? Because you always have a choice. But if you choose to stick your head in the sand and not listen, what is going to happen when our prophet, seer, and revelator turns out to be correct and we see famines, pestilences, and earthquakes? Well, the scriptures actually tell us what happens to those who put their head in the sand. They will lift up their voices and curse God, and they will harden their hearts against him. If you learn nothing from this presentation, this is the takeaway. Do not blame God. I do not believe he is at fault or behind it. Let me show you why. In 1973, Henry Kissinger said, "Who controls the food supply controls the people." Why would you want to control the people? That does not make sense to the average mind. And anyway, what has happened since 1973? Has anything happened? Well, we have scripture that warns us. And the italicized is the church that has warned us that modern Gentiles are warned against the secret combination that will seek to overthrow the freedom of all lands, nations, and countries. How many times have you read that? Seems far-fetched? How are they going to do it? Oh, they're working on it. Let me introduce to you the Great Reset. Again, from the World Economic Forum, remember? Pay attention to them. The Great Reset, most of us have probably heard of it at this point. It's being talked at all over. But this is what Klaus Schwab said, the founder. He said, "The pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reimagine and reset our world." Oh, is that necessary? What the Great Reset really is, in layman's terms, it will be the greatest transfer of wealth and the greatest consolidation of power in the history of mankind. That is ominous. Again, the World Economic Forum has 8 main planks. One of their main planks is that they want a handful of countries to dominate. So how is this going to manifest? Well, the Rockefeller Foundation has put out Reset the Table. This is meeting the moment to transform the U.S. food system. I still ask, why do we need to transform our food system? But this is a plan to revolutionize the global food supply from the top down. This Reset the Table is the plan for the global food system, and it has 3 main objectives. Listen carefully. Number 1, to integrate the food system under a dominant global entity. Number 2, to collectivize and centralize control of the food supply under a global entity. To engender prosperity within the stakeholders of the global entity. Are you starting to see the picture? Who is that dominant global entity? Because it's not the people. Another plank of the Great Reset is, by 2030, you will own nothing and you will be happy. How are they going to do that? Well, not fully sure. It's just beginning to roll out. But I would like you to go and look up BlackRock. BlackRock is the world's largest asset manager with $9 trillion in assets, and they are the leading proponent behind the Great Reset. They're buying up single-family homes at a premium, forcing the middle class to become home renters. We see this drastically in Utah. This will eliminate the middle class's ability to build wealth. And this is incredible because BlackRock is a Federal Reserve-funded financial institution. Basically, they are printing fiat money to be able to buy up homes so that the people cannot afford them. And it is not just BlackRock. It seems as if all the large financial institutions across the world are doing this. We're seeing this from Lloyd's of London, Vanguard, State Street. This is happening worldwide. There is a website on the page, as there are on most of my pages. I recommend that you go and read that so that you know what's going on. And are you aware that the mega-rich are buying up U.S. farmland? Bill Gates is now America's biggest private farmland owner. But Ted Turner and Jeff Bezos are also heavily investing in ranch and farmland. So the mega-rich are going to own all the farmland, and they're going to own as much residential land as they can get. What does that spell for you? Well, maybe Moroni saw this in his warning to modern Gentiles. Does this give you a different perspective when Moroni says, "Wherefore the Lord commandeth you, when ye shall see these things come among you, that ye shall awake to the sense of your awful situation"? Are you awaking? Because our situation is pretty awful. "Because of this secret combination which shall be among you." Oh, you mean the secret combination that wants to own all of this? And what do they want to do? Well, it seeketh to overthrow the freedom of all lands, nations, and countries, and it bringeth to pass the destruction of the people. Yes, this is an awful situation, and it really could engender fear, but Isaiah tells us, "I am the Lord your God, who holds your right hand, and I tell you, don't be afraid. I will help you." We need a testimony of this more than ever, because peace is his goal, and preparedness is our price. And I do not mean to make you afraid. Our Father in heaven has given us 149 admonitions in the scriptures said by the Savior not to be afraid. But remember, we are currently reducing the food supply when we should be stockpiling it. But what is our promise? Our promise is that Zion shall escape if she observe to do all things whatsoever I have commanded her. And what have we been commanded to do? We have been commanded to prepare. And we are not alone. There are many who are in this boat together. All of us know people who are working on preparedness. All of us know people who can have the same conversation that I've just had with you today. There are many people that know what is going on. We are not alone. We need to band together. So whether you are in a ward or in a community or in a neighborhood or just a group of friends, get together and work together. This is what I did in my ward. Modify it as you will. We showed this presentation, and then we sent out a flyer asking people to sign up for one of 4 groups. This is what the flyer looked like. The first choice was, we have no food storage and we want help buying food storage monthly. And we wanted to know, well, do you want to start with the basics from the church? Do you want to start with individual items that the church doesn't sell? Or do you just want to start with prepared meals? We did learn something interesting. The younger ones among us feel very overwhelmed about starting with the basics from the church. A lot of them don't know how to cook with it. If you have those in your area, help them with prepared meals. The cost is higher, but having something is better than nothing. We showed them what we can get from the church. We also showed them some of the company around that sell the individual items. We also showed them some of the companies that simply do buckets of prepared food. The second group is, we've got some food storage, we need more, and we want to supplement. This was the majority of our responses. Most people had some food storage, but they needed to supplement. For them, we were going to do things individually. We were going to check for sales all around us. We learned where the good websites were, and we send out emails as we find bargains. We had a few that just wanted to get it all out of the way in one fell swoop. For them, we just went to these companies that could give you a year's supply of food all at one time. Then there was another group that really felt like they didn't need help with food storage because they were pretty prepared, but they wanted help in other preparedness areas. And we asked them what they wanted help with. A lot of people really wanted help with water. And we can supply water assistance for all budgets, whether it is the water bricks, the water bottles, or the integrated water system that actually connects into your plumbing. The one thing, don't buy these barrels and leave them sitting empty. We also said that we would teach people how to garden if they wanted to, teach them how to control the soil vitality. We talked about hugelkultur, which is an absolute necessity in a drought situation. That is when you put logs at the bottom of a raised bed or a garden. And when the logs absorb all the water, you can end up watering maybe once every 7 days in a drought situation. It's quite brilliant. We also offered class on sprouting. If you really don't want to garden, but you still know you need your nutrients, we can teach classes on sprouting and microgreens where you can grow things right on your kitchen counter. We just asked people to speak up for what they wanted. Because the Lord loves effort, and effort brings rewards. And our prophet has promised us, when we seek to hear, truly hear his son, we will be guided to know what to do in any circumstance. And I reiterate that. I know that he will guide us, whatever our circumstances are, because we have been promised that our future is serene and secure. So that's it for the presentation. If you would like to receive constant updates regarding the state of our global food supply, I recommend the Ice Age Farmer. A good portion of this presentation came from this incredible young man. He really follows what's going on with our food supply. You can find him on the web, that's on the left, or you can find him on Telegram, where he gives constant updates. But please stay up on what is going on and share it with everyone. So we would just like everybody to know that this PowerPoint I created is available for all to use. The link will be on Latter-day Media's site, and you have my absolute permission to add or subtract whatever you want. If you are uncomfortable with showing the agenda portion of this in a ward meeting, please eliminate those slides. Do whatever you need to do to help our brothers and sisters get prepared. Thank you.